My boss just gave me a $50,000 bonus and told me I'm part of the family. An hour later, I found his silk tie under my bed. My wife is acting like everything is fine, but I can still smell his cologne in our room. He's not rewarding me. He's paying rent for my wife. I have $50,000 in my pocket, his tie in my hand, and no idea who I'm living with. Here's the story of how I found out my life was being sponsored by my boss. I used to think I was the luckiest guy in the world. Seriously. In America, they sell you this dream from the moment you can crawl. Work hard, be loyal, and you'll get the house with the white picket fence, the beautiful wife, and the boss who treats you like a son. For 5 years, I swallowed that lie whole. I was the first one in the office at 7 a.m. and the last one to leave at 8 p.m. My boss, Mike, a guy who smells like expensive cigars and old money, used to slap me on the back every single Friday and say, "You're doing great, kid. You're part of the family." Family. That word is the biggest scam in corporate history. Let's talk about Mike for a second. He's the kind of guy who wears a $3,000 suit to a casual lunch and drives a Porsche Taycan like he's in a Fast and Furious movie. He was my mentor. He invited me and my wife, Sarah, to his lake house in Connecticut. He bought us a $500 bottle of scotch when we closed our first mortgage. I looked up to him. I wanted to be him. And Sarah? She adored him. She'd always say how inspiring it was to see a self-made man like Mike. I thought it was just professional respect. I thought we were all on the same team. But looking back, the signs were everywhere. Like the way Sarah started knowing about my upcoming promotions before I did. Or how she suddenly started wearing that Cartier Love bracelet that definitely didn't fit into our monthly budget. When I asked her about it, she just laughed and said, "Oh, Mike's wife gave it to me. She's clearing out her jewelry box." I was so blinded by the hustle, so desperate to climb that corporate ladder, that I just nodded and went back to my spreadsheets. I was a top performer, after all. I was the backbone of the department. The routine was simple. Mike would send me on these 3-day client acquisition trips to Chicago or Dallas. He'd personally book my flights and tell me, "Take your time, get the deal done, don't worry about the office." I felt like a king. I'd call Sarah from my hotel room, tell her I missed her, and she'd sound distracted. I thought she was just busy with her own career. I thought the muffled laughter in the background was just the TV. The day everything changed was a Tuesday. A boring gray Tuesday in suburban New Jersey. I was supposed to be in Philadelphia for a meeting, but the client canceled last minute because of a family emergency. I decided not to call Sarah. I wanted to surprise her. I stopped by that bakery she likes on 4th Street, grabbed a box of those overpriced macarons, and drove home humming some stupid song on the radio. I was thinking about our future. I was thinking about how Mike told me a big change was coming for me. When I pulled into our driveway, I noticed something off. There was a black SUV parked 2 houses down. It looked familiar, but I didn't let my mind go there. I walked up to the front door, unlocked it quietly, and stepped inside. The house smelled like sandalwood and expensive tobacco. Mike's smell. I stood in the hallway for a long time, just breathing. The silence was heavy, the kind of silence that tells you your life is about to explode. I walked toward the stairs. My heart wasn't racing. It was cold. It felt like a block of ice in my chest. I reached the master bedroom, and the door was slightly ajar. I didn't go in. I couldn't. But through the crack, I saw it. A navy blue silk tie draped over the edge of our mahogany bed frame. The exact same tie Mike had worn to the board meeting on Monday. I didn't scream. I didn't burst in and start a fight. Why? Because at that moment, I realized I wasn't the husband in this house anymore. I was just the guy who paid the property taxes. I walked back downstairs, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at those macarons. 10 minutes later, I heard the shower upstairs turn off. 20 minutes later, I heard the back door click shut. I waited. I just waited. Because I knew exactly what was coming next. In this world, everything is a transaction. And Mike was about to settle the bill. I didn't sleep that night. Not for a second. I sat in the armchair in the corner of our bedroom, watching Sarah sleep. She looked so peaceful, so untouched by the fact that our marriage had just become a three-way business deal. The navy blue tie was still sitting on the dresser where I'd moved it. It looked like a coiled snake in the moonlight. I kept waiting for her to wake up, to see me sitting there, to scream or cry, or offer some pathetic excuse. But she just breathed, deep and rhythmic, perfectly content in the life Mike was paying for. By 7:30 a.m., I was in the office. I didn't even shower. I just threw on a fresh shirt and drove. The morning air in Jersey was damp and cold, matching the hollow feeling in my gut. I sat at my desk, staring at a blank Excel sheet for 2 hours. My hands weren't shaking. That was the weirdest part. I felt like a machine that had been unplugged but was still running on backup battery power. Around 10 a.m., my desk phone buzzed. It was Brenda, Mike's assistant. "He's ready for you," she said, her voice chirpy, oblivious. Or maybe she wasn't. Maybe everyone in this building knew exactly what happened on my mahogany bed yesterday. I walked toward his office. The heavy oak doors felt like the entrance to a courtroom. When I stepped inside, the smell of his expensive sandalwood cologne hit me like a physical punch. It was the same smell that was still lingering in my hair from the bedroom. Mike was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the skyline. He didn't turn around immediately. He just stood there, a king surveying his kingdom. "Sit down, kid," he said, his voice as smooth as aged bourbon. I sat. The leather chair felt too soft, like it was trying to swallow me. Mike finally turned around. He looked perfect. Crisp white shirt, silver cufflinks, and, I noticed with a jolt, a brand new tie. This one was dark red, the color of a warning light. He didn't mention the meeting in Philly. He didn't ask about my trip. He just walked over to his desk, sat down, and slid a heavy, cream-colored envelope across the polished wood. It stopped right in front of me. "I've been looking at the numbers," Mike started, leaning back and lacing his fingers behind his head. "You've been putting in incredible hours. The loyalty you've shown to this firm, it's rare. People don't value commitment the way they used to. But I do. I value it more than anything." He let the word loyalty hang in the air. It felt like a threat. I looked down at the envelope. My name was written on it in his sharp, arrogant handwriting. "Open it," he commanded softly. I pulled out the slip of paper. It was a corporate bonus check. $50,000. My heart did a slow, painful thud. In my world, 50 grand was a year's worth of mortgage payments. It was the debt on Sarah's car. It was the kitchen remodel we'd been talking about for 3 years. "Mike," my voice sounded dry, like sandpaper. "Don't," he interrupted, raising a hand. "Don't thank me. You've earned it. And let's be real. Life is getting expensive." "Sarah mentioned you guys were looking at that place in the Hamptons for the summer. Or maybe a new SUV for her. A woman like that deserves the best, don't you think?" He looked me dead in the eye. There was no shame there. No guilt. Just pure, predatory calculation. He was telling me, without saying a single dirty word, that he bought my wife, and now he was buying my silence. He was checking my price tag to see if I'd fold. "I found your tie, Mike," I said. It came out as a whisper. The room went dead silent. A normal man would have flinched. A normal man would have stammered an excuse. But Mike just smiled. A slow, thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, entering my personal space. "It's a nice tie, isn't it? Italian silk," he said, his voice dropping an octave. I have dozens of them. Sometimes I lose track of where I leave them. But the thing about ties, kid, is that they're replaceable. Just like positions in this company. Just like reputations. He tapped the check with his index finger. Tap, tap, tap. Take the money. Take Sarah to dinner. Buy her something shiny. Go home and be the husband everyone thinks you are. We're all adults here. We all know that the world doesn't run on morals. It runs on transactions. You provide the work, I provide the lifestyle. Everyone wins. He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. He walked over and put a heavy hand on my shoulder. He squeezed it. Hard. Don't be a hero, kid. Heroes end up broke and alone. Partners end up rich. Go back to work. I'll see you at the gala on Friday. I walked out of that office with the envelope burning a hole in my hand. I felt like I was carrying a piece of radioactive waste. As I passed Brenda's desk, I realized I was holding the check so tight I was crumpling the edges. I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked exactly the same, but I knew the truth. I had just been appraised, negotiated, and sold. Mike was right about one thing. Everything has a price. I just never thought mine would be $50,000 and a navy blue silk tie. I drove home with that $50,000 check sitting in my cup holder like a piece of radioactive waste. It felt heavy. It felt like a bribe. When I walked through the front door, the house didn't smell like home anymore. It smelled like roasting garlic and rosemary. Sarah was cooking her specialty chicken. Usually, this meant a good night. Tonight, it felt like a staged performance. "Honey, is that you?" Sarah called out. Her voice was too light, too perfect. I walked into the kitchen. She was wearing a silk dress that definitely didn't fit our budget, covered by a white apron. She looked radiant, not guilty. She looked like she had just won a prize, not like she had spent the afternoon destroying our marriage. "You're home late," she said, kissing my cheek. I felt like a statue. Mike called. He told me about the bonus. "Oh, baby, I'm so proud of you. I knew he'd take care of us." She wrapped her arms around my neck, and I smelled it again. Not the chicken, not her perfume. Him. That faint, woody scent of Mike's expensive sandalwood soap. It was on her skin. It was in the curtains. It was everywhere. "Yeah," I rasped, pulling her arms off me. 50,000. It's a lot of money, Sarah. It feels like hush money." She paused, holding a bottle of expensive wine. Her eyes went cold for a split second, a sharp, calculating look that reminded me exactly of Mike. "Don't be dramatic, Mark. It's a win. By the way, Mike might stop by later, just for a drink. He wanted to congratulate us properly." My heart did a slow, sickening roll. He wasn't even hiding anymore. He wanted to sit at my table and look at the man he'd just bought. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Sharp, demanding. I opened it, and there he was. Mike had swapped his suit for a black cashmere sweater. He looked like he owned the place. "Mark! My man!" he boomed, stepping inside without an invitation. He clapped me on the shoulder, his hand heavy. I couldn't let the night pass without a toast. To the future. We sat at the dining table. Sarah to my right, Mike across from us. It was a nightmare disguised as a dinner party. Every time I looked at Mike, he smiled. It was the smile of a man who had already conquered the territory. Every time Sarah laughed at his jokes, she leaned just a little too far toward him. I sat there, cutting my chicken into tiny squares, feeling like a ghost at my own funeral. Then, Sarah's phone buzzed on the table. Face up. I saw the notification. New message from Mike. They were sitting 3 feet apart, and he was texting her. I looked up. Mike was sipping his wine, looking at me with total indifference. "Everything okay, Mark?" Mike asked, his voice dripping with mock concern. "You look pale." Maybe the stress of the new position is getting to you? You know you can always rely on me to handle the heavy lifting. I'm fine, I said, my voice shaking. I reached into my pocket and felt the check. My leash. Sarah patted my hand. Her touch was ice cold. He's just overwhelmed, Mike. It's a lot of change. But he'll get used to it. Won't you, honey? Change is good, Mike said, leaning back. Most people are afraid of it. They cling to old ideas of how things should be. But the successful ones? They adapt. They realize that security is worth more than pride. He looked at Sarah, then back at me. The message was clear. I was the audience for their show. I was a line item in Mike's budget. My house was just another office where Mike came to do business. I need some air, I said, standing up so fast the chair scraped the floor. Don't be long, Sarah said, not looking up. We haven't even opened the champagne Mike brought yet. I walked out onto the back deck and breathed the cold air. I looked through the glass door at them. They were laughing. Mike said something, and Sarah tilted her head back, radiating life. They looked like the couple. I looked like the intruder. I pulled the check out and looked at it under the porch light. $50,000. The price of my soul. It felt incredibly cheap. The next morning, the office felt like a funeral home, where everyone was secretly laughing at the dead guy. Usually, when you get a $50,000 bonus, you walk in with your head held high. You're the golden boy. But as I passed the cubicles toward my new corner office, the air felt thick with something else. Pity. Or maybe just pure, unadulterated disgust. I sat down and tried to focus on the quarterly reports, but I could hear the whispers through the thin glass walls. In an office like this, secrets don't exist. They just become currency. I saw two analysts near the coffee machine looking at me, then leaning in to whisper. One of them laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that cut right through my noise-canceling headphones. I knew exactly what they were saying. They weren't talking about my outstanding performance. They were talking about why Mike's black SUV was parked in my driveway until 2 a.m. while I was working late. "Hey Mark, nice watch," one of the junior associates yelled out as he passed my door. I wasn't wearing a new watch. It was a jab, a direct hit at the fact that everyone knew I was being compensated for my flexibility. I went to the break room to get away from the stairs, but it was worse there. I overheard Brenda, Mike's assistant, talking to someone behind the pillar. "Poor Mark," she whispered, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "He thinks he's moving up, but Mike just bought him a bigger cage." "Did you see Sarah at the gala prep? She was wearing that diamond necklace Mike picked out last week. Not for his wife, for her." And Mark just stands there and takes the check. I stood there, frozen, holding a paper cup of bitter coffee. My life was a public broadcast. My wife's jewelry was a topic of office gossip. I wasn't a manager anymore. I was a mascot for Mike's ego. I was the guy who sold his pride for a corner office with a view of my own ruin. Just then, Mike walked in. He looked refreshed, energized, radiating that toxic alpha energy that used to inspire me. He saw me and didn't even hesitate. He walked straight up and put his heavy arm around my shoulders in front of everyone. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. "Mark, just the man I wanted to see," Mike boomed. He looked around the room, making sure everyone was watching his best friend. "I've got a special project for you. We're expanding the London deal. It's huge. I need my best man on a flight tonight. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Total immersion. London. 3 weeks." I looked at him, and for a second, the mask of the friendly mentor dropped. His eyes were cold, commanding. He wasn't asking. He was clearing the house. He wanted me 5,000 miles away, across the Atlantic, so he could have the master bedroom to himself without the annoyance of me sitting on the back deck in the dark. "Tonight?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Tonight, kid. Don't worry about the expenses. Everything is on the company. First class, 5-star hotels, live a little. And Sarah, don't worry about her. I'll make sure she's taken care of while you're gone. We're family, remember? I'll look after her like she's my own. He squeezed my shoulder so hard it felt like his fingers were touching the bone. It was a physical reminder of who owned me. He was literally paying for a plane ticket to get me out of his way, and he was doing it using the company's travel budget. It was brilliant, in a sick, twisted way. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was making the shareholders pay for the privacy to do it. I went back to my office and sat in the silence. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Mike told me about London. So exciting. Don't worry about the house. I'll be fine. Have a safe flight. Love you. She didn't even ask if I wanted to go. She didn't say she'd miss me. She was already planning her 3-week vacation with the boss in my own home. I looked at the $50,000 check still sitting in my drawer. This was the trap. If I stayed, I was a coward. If I went to London, I was a sellout. If I quit, I was broke and homeless. Mike had mapped out every exit and blocked it with a stack of $100 bills. I realized then that the American dream I'd been chasing wasn't about freedom. It was about finding a master who paid well enough to make the chains feel like jewelry. I started packing my briefcase. Not because I wanted to go to London, but because I realized I didn't have a home to stay in anymore. I'm sitting in a suite at the Savoy in London. It's the kind of room that costs $3,000 a night. There's a bottle of vintage scotch on the mahogany desk, courtesy of the firm. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I can see the Thames reflecting the city lights. It's beautiful. It's perfect. And it feels like a high-end prison cell. Every drink I pour, every steak I order from room service is paid for by Mike. It's all on the corporate card. He's not just paying for my silence anymore. He's paying for my absence. I'm 5,000 miles away from my own bed, and I've never been more aware of who is sleeping in it. I tried to work. I really did. I went to the meetings with the British investors, sat in the leather chairs, and talked about synergy and global expansion. But my mind was back in New Jersey. I was a ghost haunting my own life from across the Atlantic. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart hit the floor. I was waiting for a text that said, "I'm sorry," but all I got were photos of Sarah at expensive restaurants. "Mike took me out to celebrate your big trip," she'd message, followed by a heart emoji. It was a Tuesday night in London, which meant it was late afternoon back home. I opened the app for our home security system. We'd installed it a year ago for safety. Now, it was my window into my own humiliation. I saw Mike's Porsche pull into the driveway. He didn't even park on the street anymore. He parked right in front of the garage, like he lived there. I watched him walk up to the front door. He didn't ring the bell. He had a key. My key. He walked inside, and a minute later, I saw Sarah run into the frame of the living room camera. She didn't look like the tired, stressed wife I'd left behind. She looked alive. She threw her arms around him, and he lifted her off her feet, laughing. I sat there in my 5-star hotel room, clutching a crystal glass of whiskey that Mike had bought me, watching my wife kiss the man who signed my paychecks. It was the most honest moment of my life. There was no more guessing. No more, maybe I'm overreacting. It was a business transaction, and I was the only one not enjoying the profits. I looked at the scotch. I looked at the luxury furniture. I realized that Mike hadn't just taken my wife. He had taken my reality. He had turned me into a cuckold-in-chief, a high-ranking executive whose primary job was to stay out of the way. The $50,000 bonus wasn't for my hard work. It was the first installment of my soul's liquidation. In America, they tell you that money is freedom. But sitting there, watching them on a 4-inch screen, I realized that money is the ultimate leash. I could quit. I could fly back right now and scream. But then what? The Savoy bill wouldn't be paid. The mortgage would default. Sarah would leave me for the man who could keep her in silk. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a service provider. I provided the legal name on the marriage certificate so Mike could have his fun without the mess of a divorce from his own wife. I was the stable element that allowed them to play house. I turned off the app. I couldn't watch anymore. I walked over to the desk and looked at the scotch bottle again. I wanted to smash it against the wall, but I didn't. I just poured another glass, because at the end of the day, I was too well paid to be angry. And that was the most terrifying realization of all. I was waiting for the London project to end, but I knew that even when I went back, I'd never truly be home again. I landed at Newark at 5 a.m., 3 days earlier than planned. I didn't call Sarah. I didn't text Mike. I just took a taxi, watched the gray suburban sprawl of New Jersey fly by the window, and felt like a ghost returning to a house that had already forgotten I existed. The $50,000 was still in my bank account, untouched, like a bloodstain I couldn't wash off. When the cab pulled up to my house, my heart didn't even race. It just felt heavy. There, in my driveway, parked exactly where my car usually sits, was Mike's silver Porsche. It looked entitled. It looked like it belonged there, more than I did. I walked up to the front door, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for my keys. For a second, I was terrified they wouldn't work, that they'd change the locks while I was busy expanding the firm in London. But the cylinder turned. The door opened with that familiar, soft click. The house was warm, too warm, and it smelled different. The scent of my life, detergent, old books, my coffee, was gone. It was replaced by that suffocating sandalwood and expensive tobacco, Mike's brand. I walked into the kitchen. There were 2 coffee mugs on the counter. One was mine, the one with the chipped handle. The other was a sleek black travel mug with Mike's initials on it. They were sitting side by side, a domestic pair. I looked at the trash can. It was full of takeout containers from the oyster bar Mike loved. They hadn't even bothered to hide the evidence. Why would they? I was on the payroll. Then I heard movement from the backyard. I walked to the glass sliding doors and stopped. Mike was out there. He was wearing my old BBQ apron, the one Sarah gave me for our 3rd anniversary. He was tossing a ball to our golden retriever, Buster. The dog was ecstatic. He was jumping up on Mike, wagging his tail, looking at him with the same loyalty he used to give me. Mike was laughing, shouting, "Good boy, Buster. Who's a good boy?" Sarah was sitting on the patio furniture, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea and watching them with a soft, content smile. It wasn't the "I miss my husband" smile. It was the "I finally have the life I wanted" smile. I stood behind the glass, 3 feet away, and realized I was looking at a perfect family photo, and I wasn't in it. I was the guy who took the picture. I was the benefactor who funded this scene with my 3-week immersion trip. Mike saw me first. He didn't jump. He didn't look guilty. He just stopped tossing the ball, wiped his hands on my apron, and smiled that predator's smile. "Mark, you're back early, kid," he shouted through the glass. "London must have been a breeze if you finished this fast. Come on out. Sarah just made a fresh pot." Sarah turned around, her face going pale for exactly 1 second before she masked it with a practiced, bright grin. "Honey, you surprised us. We were just, Mike was helping me with the grill. It was acting up again." The lie was so thin, it was transparent. Mike walked over, slid the door open, and stepped inside, still wearing my apron. He looked me up and down, checking for any signs of rebellion. "You look tired, Mark. Go upstairs, take a shower. Use the guest bath, though. Sarah's got her things all over the master right now. We'll talk about your report in the office on Monday. For now, just relax. You're home." He patted me on the cheek. Not a slap, not a punch. A pat. Like you do to a dog that finally learned to sit. He walked past me into my living room, sat on my sofa, and picked up my TV remote. I looked at Sarah. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just started clearing the coffee mugs, humming that same stupid song. I realized then that they didn't even fear me. I was so well bought, so thoroughly owned by that $50,000 check, that I wasn't even a threat to their happiness. I was just a tenant in Mike's second home. I didn't make a scene. I didn't even unpack my suitcase. I just stood in the middle of the living room, watching Mike flip through the channels on my TV. He looked too comfortable there, like he'd been born on that sofa. In the kitchen, Sarah was humming, talking about dinner plans as if I were just a piece of furniture they'd moved to a different corner of the room. I walked upstairs. The bedroom smelled like a life that wasn't mine anymore. I pulled the $50,000 check out of my bag, the one I never even bothered to deposit. Then I reached into the drawer and pulled out Mike's navy blue silk tie. I laid the check flat on Sarah's pillow and placed the tie perfectly on top of it. It was my official letter of resignation from this marriage and this firm. As I walked back down, Mike didn't even turn his head. "Going somewhere, Mark?" he asked, his eyes glued to the screen. "Just getting some air," I replied. It was the last lie I'd ever tell in that house. I walked out, hailed a cab, and headed straight back to the airport. I had some cash from London and my passport in my pocket. In America, they say everyone has a price. Mine was apparently high enough to buy my freedom from people who thought they owned me. I wasn't a hero. I was just a free man who finally stopped being part of the family.